Hello, and welcome to episode 145 on the Everyday Joy podcast. Thank you to the people who've messaged through, letting me know what conversations they want to dive deeper into. Andrea wants to know more about this idea of heaping burning coals on your enemy's head. It's quite a visual thing. What does it mean? It revolves around the idea of not taking revenge and using kindness as a weapon, really. But what does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that even mean? Great question, Andrea. We're going to do a deep dive into that next week. Again, I don't have the answers. I'm just learning and growing and discovering along with you. And I think that's the beauty of this podcast. We're all in this together. Insert High School Musical song. All right, let's get into today's conversation with Jackie.
Work with a smile on your face, always keeping in mind that no matter who happens to be giving the orders, you're really serving God. It's Ephesians 6, verse 7 from the Message Bible.
I've got the incredible Jackie here in studio with me.
Joy.
Hello. We've talked about work before.
Yes.
And speaking of work, that is the topic
for today.
Today. Work with a smile on your face. Always keeping in mind that no matter who happens to be giving the orders, you're really serving God. What are your first impressions of this one, Jack?
That everything I do is for God. It's just that check-in, isn't it? That, really quick reminder that we're not really serving man, we're not really serving the world, we're serving God. And that it's a great verse for, a moment of correction that you might have on your own. I've always been taught that, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit bring correction rather than condemnation. So it's a great check-in to say, well, am I feeling... And correction brings with it something that says, hey, this has gone wrong, but you're still a great person. And here's how we can be better. Here's how it could be better, or here's a way you could do something differently. Whereas condemnation says, hey, this went wrong and you suck. And, which is never what we hear from God, which is never what he says to us. We've got that message because of Jesus that he loves us, he's given us a hope, and he, sees us as one of his children. So you're good in his eyes. He sees us through that Jesus lens. Yeah. Everything I do is for him.
And I think that can carry you through some of the most difficult seasons at work. Let's be real. There are times when it is really, really hard to turn up at work. And the first part of that verse, work with a smile on your face. Well, it's all well and good when you love everyone that you get along with and they love and they respect you and the hours are great and the pay's great and you feel a sense of accomplishment. But when you don't have any of those things, it is really hard to turn up. And I really feel for you if you're listening right now and you're in that space. It's a tough place to be.
It's a very tough place.
But today's encouragement is because your identity is in God and never was in what you do for work, you can still turn up with a smile because your identity isn't in what you do at work, but it's in who you get to serve through your work. Yeah. And I think that's been something that I've learnt as well. It's the fact that I can turn up at work and choose to worship God through the way I maybe do my radio show on tough days when I'm just like, I've got no positivity in me and I've got to do this thing. And I just say, you know what, God, I am going to do the best that I can because I want to worship you with the skills and the talents that you've given me. And he always carries me through. I think that's the other thing that comes to mind is when we do that, when we come at it with the perspective of God, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to do the best that I can because you are my ultimate employer. Yep. He provides. He provides the strength, the energy, what you need to get through that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not about forgetting an injustice or, letting that slide or not sticking up for yourself or anything like that. It's just an attitude shift that says, and this is going back to that story that, we talked about on that previous episode. I had a really bad attitude. Like, yes, there had possibly been some things that, that went down that, weren't fair or I didn't think were right. But that caused my attitude to stink. But this is the attitude shift. This is the moment where we go, hey, it's not all about me. It's not all about what you over there did. It's about my attitude towards what I'm doing, and that brings the smile. That brings the joy. And there's so many verses around joy that doesn't make sense. For that happened, and you're still able to walk through it with a smile on your face. Why? Yeah. Because my attitude changed, because I took my focus, I took my eyes off what was happening in front of me, and I put them on God.
So I've got a bit of a story on this one, Jackie. It's a job story.
Oh, I love a good job story. We've talked about school trauma. Let's go into the job realm, yeah?
Let's talk about first jobs. So I need to start off by saying that for me, my whole life, my structure on which I lived and interacted with people was based on Indian cultural values, and there's a high importance placed on respecting your elders. And so when I went into this job environment, I mean, I had only have experience being a student and having teachers, being a child and having parents. And so I kind of go into this work environment and I had colleagues, and I just didn't quite know how to deal with that. And that some of them were older than me and some of them were younger than me. And so that was a whole learning process. And there was a lot of stuff, a lot of injustice, I think, because I was a yes person. I think people very quickly realized that they could get me to do things and I just wouldn't really say no. And so a lot of that stuff was happening. And on the side, I also really felt like I didn't really fit in. This gift store served clients from really affluent backgrounds, and a lot of the girls who worked there were kind of like the daughters of the clients, and so they all just lived in this posh bubble that I just felt like I just didn't understand. I just didn't really fit in, and I really, really struggled at that job because I just felt like an outsider the whole time. And I remember just dreading going into work, and I just didn't have, I think, the skills to stick up for myself, and on top of that, I didn't feel like I fit in. And I think I remember wanting to wrap things up there and just leave because I was just really struggling. And then this verse came up. It might have been a church friend who said to me, work with a smile on your face, always keeping in mind that no matter who happens to be giving the orders, you're really serving God. And so I remember one day, about a year into it, I decided that before every shift, and I'm not saying this is how amazing is Joy and how holy is she. It really was I needed the money and I needed to find a way to make this work for another year. I remembered saying, right, before I go into every shift, I'm going to pray that God will bring a customer into the store that I can speak life into, that I can listen to, that I can encourage. And the moment my attitude changed from, I'm just here just to get through the day and get paid and go home, to no, despite how I feel I'm being treated, I'm here for that one person who just needs someone to listen to them and understand them. And Jackie, that was the game changer.
Yeah.
Because I stopped seeing them as posh people who had all the money in the world to buy things I could never afford, to this is a person who's hurting and who's here on a Friday night wandering, looking at gift cards because their whole life is falling apart at home. And I couldn't see that before. And I think God really softened my heart in that space and allowed me to really see things differently. But I had to reshape my whole perspective, reshape the whole way I entered into that, and just say, God, I'm going to serve you today. And in the end, when I left the job, I felt good. It was the right time, and I had served in that season well, and it wasn't awful. I didn't rage quit. It was turned around. Yeah.
And isn't it amazing? Right, nothing changed. Nothing changed in that job. The same people were still working there. The same customers were still coming in. Nothing changed in the natural. You just had a shift in your mind because Holy Spirit, through a friend and through a verse, said to you, hey, you know, let's change things a little bit. Let's take your focus off your environment and your circumstances, and let's put it on God. Reminder of who you're serving and why. And look at what happened. Isn't that it's just phenomenal?
Yeah. And I think maybe that's something for you today. If you're struggling with your workplace, I love what you said before earlier as well, Jack. It's not disregarding bad treatment, and it's not sweeping things under the rug, but it's saying, I'm going to step forward with the right attitude, that I'm here to serve God, that God's called me into this workplace for a reason and I'm going to see it through. Also dealing with all of those things, but not getting so sucked up, I suppose, in the negativity of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good. And he can do it. Yeah, if you're listening and this is hitting home for you today, just like I did at the time that I spoke about in the previous episode, write this verse down. Put it where you work. Take it with you. Like what Joy did. Pray before you go into work and just say, hey, Lord, help me put my focus on you. Take it off my circumstances. Take it off that person that's really annoying and let me do this for you.
As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that you might be listening right now and A, you aren't working at the moment, or B, you are working in an environment that looks quite different. Maybe you are a sole trader, maybe you work remotely. I'm not really sure what your situation is. Maybe for you, you are a stay-at-home mum. Maybe for you, you are looking for work right now and it's a touchy subject. I just want to acknowledge that everyone's coming at this from different perspectives, but there is one thing that we all have in common. We are all gifted 24 hours in a day, and we all have the choice to invite God into it. Now, specifically for those of you listening who do have a 9-to-5, you work a job and you might have some things just bubbling away under the surface, I love how Jackie touches on the fact that you can invite God into it and you can change the environment by changing your perspective and changing your attitude. And if you want to listen to more of Jackie's story where she talked about an attitude shift, that's episode 109. I saw this great quote online and it says this: working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. And we've all felt that way when we are feeling stretched and we are just staying up late, getting things done, but it doesn't feel like work because we're so passionate about it, because we so believe in what we do. And you can bring that into your 9-to-5. You can bring that into your job, not by changing your job. Not necessarily that's always the right way to go. Sometimes it is. But sometimes we can simply change that attitude by changing who we serve. Turning up at work and saying, God, I'm not going to call this work today. I'm going to call it worship. I'm going to honor and worship you in the way I treat the people around me, in the way I love on the clients, in the way I write each email, in the way I conduct a meeting. There's so many ways that we can worship and honor and serve God in our everyday jobs. Well, that wraps up today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. I look forward to catching up again with you tomorrow.